Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media and virtual production. And our second hour is something we like to spend a little bit more time on. So we might be talking about, today, we'll be talking about remote collaboration. So we're very excited to have Philippe back. He's going to be talking about that and kind of walking us through that process. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about plugins. There's a lot of plugins on sale right now. This is Black Friday week, so we're going to talk about what audio plugins do we actually use, and this was based on a discussion we had last week. On Wednesday, this is also based on a discussion that we had over the weekend. Studio for $20,000. So if you have $20,000 to spend on a studio, it was 15 when we talked about it, but I realized it didn't include lights and other things. And so if you had $25,000, what would you do? So we're gonna brainstorm that on Wednesday. Thursday is going to be 2 hours of Q&A. We're here; it's Turkey Day here in the United States, so we're going to go 2 hours of Q&A. And then on Friday, we're going to basically brainstorm second hours. What do we want to see? What kind of subjects can we do? We usually kind of build this up at the end of the month so that we can think about next month. And we're going to try to pack it as tightly as we can. And then, of course, on Saturday, we don't have cooking. Damyanti's taking the next couple of weeks off, but we do have the Belfast method. We have education, of course, at 8 o'clock. We don't stream that. And then we have the Belfast method, and that is... I said Tom Reynolds in the email that went out, but it'll actually be going back to Belfast today. It was a double that I missed. So anyway, we're going back to Belfast at noon on Saturday. All right, let's jump into the questions, and we have our guest question reader, Liberty White. So Liberty, go ahead and take it away.
All right, our first question comes from Rupert McCrae in Dallas, Texas. Is there any way to stream from Zoom in 1080p without screen scraping?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I wasn't sure how you meant the question, Rupert, but certainly receiving it at 1080, you can do it through ZoomISO, but externally, unless you have the proper account and credentials with our friends at Zoom, you cannot do 1080. Typically, you're 720 in a pro account and 1080 with a business account. So I'm not sure I covered your answer there.
Yep. Go ahead, Rupert.
So getting 1080 in Zoom is no problem, but the stream out to things like YouTube seems to be always at 720, no matter what type of Zoom account you're on. So I'm just trying to find a way to be able to stream that out to YouTube or somewhere else without having to screen scrape to get the 1080 that does exist in Zoom.
Yeah, I think that the only way to do that is through ZoomISO or through a screen scrape. So ZoomISO would allow you to do that as well as the screen scrape, but those are the only two ways that I know of to get a 1080 stream out. Go ahead, Guy.
Well, one more is to have a Zoom room with NDI or to pull it through NDI some way. So the third way. But yeah, I was hoping that Rupert had some trick up his sleeve here that he was going to unveil, and we were all going to be shocked and awed, but dang.
No such luck. All right, next question.
Our next question is from Rupert McCrae in Dallas, Texas. Last week's Parsec Second Hour seems to have been well recognized on social media. Could this example be a new standard for how vendors can engage with their audience?
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Oh, absolutely. You put a high quality individual in front of this panel or any intelligent questioners and then put a whole bunch of questions and they just bang them out. That brings so much credibility to a product that I think it's going to become very attractive for people to do that. Not every company has that high quality individual to put forward, so they'll have to find them or work on them or rehearse them.
Yeah, go ahead, David.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It was all about the presenter. He just was unbelievable. I wonder what sort of training, what sort of prep work we might be able to do to help companies have someone like that.
I think most companies have those people in-house. They just don't think about putting them in front of, they just don't think, they don't know what the opportunity is. And I think that we provide a very unique opportunity in the sense that that set of questions is not something that any one person, no one interviewer would have come up with those questions. It really is because of the hive mind that we bring to the process, that we bring a very high quality set of questions. And there's a lot of things that we don't do. We don't try to do gotcha questions. We don't try to put people on the ropes. We just want to know more information about their product. And I think that's very unique. And I think that as companies see things like what happened with both AJA and Parsec, which I think both were very good last week, and other ones we've had in the past, one thing that I do to prepare them is I don't think Parsec, when they first came, were planning to have him join us. I think I warned them that this is a very technical crowd, and if you give us a salesperson, they'll just chew them up. So there is some prep that's going on to kind of prepare people that we need. And we got the product manager for Bridge Live, to come join us from AJA. And so I think that that's where we have to make sure, as we're booking people, that they understand that we need product managers, we need engineering, we need high level support. We're not just another place to do a little presentation, dog and pony show. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So I've dealt this in basically enterprise IT for a long time, blogger days. You get a group of people in there, and then they just come. I don't want to say they beat up the person there, but the reality is they get a lot of questions that reporters would never ask, that HR would probably never approve of. So this type of system is just amazing to see how things go. The only thing I'd love to see, as mentioned before, would be that we'd have something a little bit more curated, so that the panel would have a little bit of time to research the product and then come with higher end questions, so we could have and see how that would work in that realm for AJA or any other company for that matter.
We do send out what we're going to talk about days in advance. So I think that there is that's the goal, is to send links out so that people know what's coming, a couple days in advance. It's one of the reasons we do not put vendors on Mondays. In general, like, we've kind of moved away from putting vendors on Mondays, that because we want them to be able to research those processes. I definitely reached out to a handful of people behind the scenes saying, hey, we really need you to turn your gas on to ask questions. And so I also do think that we may end up with after hours labs that are really built for here are this week's vendors coming in, or here's next week's vendors coming in, and having after hours labs where we literally brainstorm the kinds of things we want to make sure that we talk about, to your point, Jeffrey. But I think that, if we get serious about really making this the best place for you to show your product, not just for us, but now you have a YouTube record that is, the thing that you want to send people to learn about your product. I think that we end up in a really great space for people to come and announce their products and show their products here. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, you both touched on it. In journalism, education, in the courtroom, a little bit of research goes a long way. So that was my point, is that, just a little bit of research can also come up with really good questions.
Yep, absolutely. Next question.
Our next question is from Rupert McCrae in Dallas, Texas. A press release from IBC says that IBC 2021 will lead the way in a new era of hybrid events. How might they actually do this?
Go ahead, Bill.
I doubt they actually know, but that's part of the province of public relations. PR is there to talk to the marketplace in ways that are beneficial to your product. Their product has been live events. So obviously, and in fairness, they do have a leadership position. IBC and NAB have been the two big international shows for the introduction of new gear for as long as I can remember. And so they are, I think, struggling, as is NAB and every other in-person large event gathering oriented demonstration. They're trying to figure out what's next. And so I just kind of write that off as a little bit of flackery. They're going to try, and I think they got some smart people there, and maybe they can help the industry understand how to do this better. But I wouldn't take that too seriously. About whether they lead or something else is up to the market to determine, really.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, I was going to say, you can't get people into town, but then you have to get them to your booth. And so what I'm thinking is that it becomes booth attraction. How do you get people to show up, actually pay attention? And that's, I think, maybe IBC can do that, but I know you've often talked about, don't do it just one time. Don't compete with everyone for that booth attention. Do it over a longer period of time.
Right. Rupert?
I also just wonder whether, given the rate at which vendors are sort of pulling out, whether they are leading the way.
Well, I don't know whether they'll I'm still wondering whether they're actually going to have it happen. They're about to go through a huge spike. Again, they're about to see a huge spike. I think it's actually getting to the point where it's almost irresponsible to run the event, given what's happening in Europe at the moment. So it'll be interesting to see. I think that they had a whole year to produce a great digital event. The hybrid events aren't going to work. They're not going to. It may be a new era of hybrid events, but that's not what's going to happen in the long term. That's the reality. Next question.
Rick Combs in Columbia, Tennessee. We have been using Wirecast for years with no problems. On last night's stream, in the middle, it went from 900 KB to 87 KB. What could be the problem? Restarted the PC, same issue. Will not get any higher. We have a solid fiber 1 gig up and down.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
It's not always the computer that's the problem. You do have the internet connection. You said you had a one gig fiber connection, but it's still going from point A to point B. And there's any point that something could slow down from there that could cause the problem. The first thing that I would do is I would try and see if I can connect up to another internet source. I have 2 internet connections in the house, plus my mobile device, which I can use to do tests going that way. If that doesn't make a difference, the other thing that I'll do is if you're sending something to YouTube, send it to Facebook instead. Send it to another source and see if you get to your 9 meg connection and go from there. There's always a possibility that the computer could be causing a problem, but in this case, I would think that it's more on the internet from point A to point B.
Go ahead, Peter.
Given you said it's a PC, I'm assuming Windows. So if you've got automatic updates set, perhaps something updated that didn't require reboot, I would look into that. One thing that I don't like doing, but because it's Windows, try uninstalling and reinstalling. Yes, I know it's a horrible thing to do, but because it's Windows, that's something you may try, and that's all I've got. So
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I would try setting some motion, something like the Buck Bunny clip, or just something moving, because if you're throwing a slide up as the first thing, there's some of these encoders that are VBR encoders, and they'll latch on to no movement, and they'll just start pushing up a really low frame per second because it just thinks that there's nothing there. So when I see something that low, I think that it's holding on to some kind of static thing from the get-go. So try, once you fire up the stream, make sure you have video moving through there. So you just use an animated clip or something to get you going first.
Go, Jeffrey.
Yeah, and to Peter's point, there is another thing called resetting the preferences inside a Wirecast. You just go to the support page, there's a little button there. You have to close out a Wirecast, reset the preferences. You'll have to reset some stuff back up, but that might help in on the PC side.
Yeah, one other thing to consider is that HTTP traffic, like RTMP, requires a return. So if you have HTTP, you want to do a test and see if you have a high ping. Now, this may not be something that is your problem. It could be on the ingest side, or it could be on anything in between. But if the HTTP traffic is not getting back to you fast enough, it'll cause your RTMP to stall. So this could be something that is, a momentary or a non-permanent issue. So I would keep on streaming tests, but it could have been congestion on that day that caused HTTP stalls on the return, and RTMP will wait to send new packets if it doesn't get confirmation that the packets that it sent got there. Next question.
Our next question is from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. What are the panel's thoughts on the OWC ministack STX has a SATA HDD SSD bay, an NVMe M.2 PCIe SSD slot 3 Thunderbolt USB-C ports? And there's a link.
How much is it? There's the question for the day. All right, go ahead, Mitchell.
OWC makes great stuff, and I use a lot of it here. But anything that incorporates an NVMe M.2 Liberty SSD is super fast. It's as fast as you can get from anything. And if you incorporate that into a storage space, you're going to be able to do pretty much anything you want in video editing.
Curious how big these are. Are they the same size as a Mac Mini? They have the same
footprint of a Mac Mini.
Exactly. Oh yeah, that's pretty slick. That's very much like the ones that I have that from Saatchi, I think is what there's there. Go ahead, Bill.
I am super stoked because I am always starved for Thunderbolt ports because I've got so many things that are driven by that between audio interfaces and switchers and everything else. So I'm excited to get a 1-in, 3-out. Just that alone, let alone that blazing fast storage interconnect. So I'm pretty excited for this product.
So this is going out to USB-A outputs. Is that correct?
No, it's the full Thunderbolt. Those aren't.
It's Thunderbolt.
Oh, it's just hard
All
to
the
tell
This
from
is
their
the back.
photos.
USB
This
ports
is
are
the
all
back of
high-speed.
the device right here, and it seems that it doesn't daisy chain together. It's just a straight up USB into the
That's
computer.
an older version.
That's not
The
the
newer
current
ones
one. It's
are-
brand new.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm
I've
just
got
looking
the
at an older
I've
one.
got the new one up here.
Oh, there we go. Very interesting. Okay, that's great. And how much is it? Do we
Not
know?
much.
$299,
It really
I
is-
think.
Yeah,
Something like
most
that.
of the
Great.
cost is the SSDs. It's what you put in it.
Right. That's great. That's fantastic. Yeah.
Look at that bottom unit. Just Thunderbolt, Thunderbolt,
Yeah.
Thunderbolt, Thunderbolt.
Yeah, that's amazing. All right. Next question. Oh, did I skip
James?
somebody? Hold on. Did I? Hold on. I'm lost. And when I try to actually research stuff that we actually talk about, I end up in a different state here. No. Okay. Good. Next question.
James Hutchinson in Dublin, Ireland. A strange thing happened yesterday. When testing ZoomISO, I could not log into a recurring meeting. I never had any problems previously. The only thing different was that I changed some settings on Zoom. Any ideas why this would happen?
Well, the only thing different that you change some settings on Zoom is the settings are probably pretty important. So I think it's hard for us to know what that question would be, but the only thing different is changing some settings. I'm sure that those settings made a difference. Like I'm not positive, I guess, but I'd say 90% chance whatever those settings are. Anytime you change settings, especially with something that's interacting deeply with the process. So if you want to ask another question today or tomorrow, let us know exactly what you changed inside of Zoom, because I have a feeling even an update to Zoom can affect how something that's running as deeply into it as ISO operates. And so any change should be considered something you have to think about and test before you do it. Next question.
Lois Richter in Davis, California. Now that many physical stores that used to sell electronics are no longer around, where do you get your little electro-bits?
Go ahead, TJ.
So I get it either from Amazon.com or my local Micro Center store has a moderate selection of that type of thing. So that's a local resource for me.
Go
Or
ahead, Courtney.
there's also in Minneapolis, Axeman Surplus. Amazing. If you ever get a chance to go there, it's wild.
Courtney.
Yeah, since Fry's closed and in larger cities, you're going to find this problem, Lois, that real estate prices have gone up so high that companies that sell small, low-profit things like components, electronic components, are not going to be able to survive. Even the big chains have gone under for that reason. So Amazon.com is the best place now to buy stuff. It's a lot cheaper. Get Amazon Prime so you have free delivery, so you don't have to worry about shipping prices on ordering a $2 product. They'll ship it to you free. A lot of times, shipping would be $3 or $4 from anywhere if you didn't have Prime. So that's where I suggest. Or eBay.
Good. Rupert.
Yeah, plus one on Micro Center if you happen to have one nearby. I know they're not in every market, but TJ's right. They have a modest selection of sort of tinkering components and things like that, and some other useful stuff. But here in Texas, I'm also pretty lucky to have Alltex Electronics. They've got stores across the state. I think it's maybe just Texas, but they're actually pretty good. They've got selection of it's mainly installers go there, so it's not quite retail, not quite consumer. So you get a good selection of stuff there. But Amazon, I was just looking at resistors. I can get resistors here in 2 hours.
John.
Plus one on what Rupert said. We had 1 hour, 2 hour delivery here in Vegas. Never more than 24 hours. I just did the rocket project. I ordered tons of electronics. All came in Amazon less than 24 hours.
Good, Peter.
Plus one on the other guys. We were talking about it pre-show actually, and obviously, Alex, you've been to the JCO over in Melbourne, Australia. They're fortunate to be here in New Zealand too. But Amazon, of course, but Element 14, so element14.com is a really... If you go there, I will not see you probably for a day because you'll just go down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in Australia and New Zealand, you are very fortunate to have JCAR. JCAR is I walked in randomly in Melbourne and just was blown away, and then found out that they had an entire chain of these geekery extravaganzas all through Australia. So I think that it's It's amazing. I get almost everything on Amazon. Adafruit is another one. If you're looking for something a little bit more complicated than just raw components, I buy a lot of stuff off Adafruit as well. Next question.
Our next question is from Mitchell Hill in Wilmington, Delaware. The Atomos Connect is a low-cost way to get HDMI into USB for streaming on your computer. What method do you use to connect to Zoom?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, of course, I use the Atem Mini, but in looking at the Atomos Connect, you see it's about $59, and it looks to me like it's basically a repackage of these HDMI captures, which you can find on Amazon for about $17. And I've used these in a number of situations where people have to take production on set and send it out to a remote Zoom client somewhere, and they seem to work fine. I don't get any complaints. And as Alex has said, the color space conversion may not be correct if you're trying to do accurate color capture and everything. But as far as getting the information across in 1080p, it works fine. Both of those will take 4K in, but they always stream in 1080p 60. So that's what's going out the USB ports.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, the Black Friday pricing on those Atomos USB dongles is like $35 US. So
seems worth testing. I mean, I think that what we should do is make a list of the ones that we want to test, and I'll just buy all of them, all the ones that are under $100, and just run them through scopes to just see what happens. Even the we've already proven that the Atem Minis shift the gamma on the way through, so it's not everything shifting the gamma and doing some other damage to it. And I have some specific ways that we can test that to really figure out what's happening with each one of these. I think it'd be a useful thing. Again, for our new channel that's going to be coming up soon, Jeffrey, contact me. But those kinds of tests will be something we work on. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, in relationship to that, DJI, Doug Johnson, I think, did a comprehensive test of these small, cheap capture devices versus more expensive ones. So I think if you look on his website, you might find that comparison and a nice chart already done.
Yeah, Doug's is quite good.
Oh, great. Perfect. Next question.
Our next question is from Lois Richter in Davis, California. What is meant by who is cutting the show?
Go ahead, TJ.
So what is meant by who is cutting the show is the current YouTube stream, which goes out, not the Office Hours 2.0 one, but the current YouTube stream is my view. Since I'm the host, it's my view of the gallery or the speaker view. So if I switch, right now I'm in gallery view, and now I'm switching to speaker view. And if you're watching the YouTube stream, you will see that change go. And so whatever I am viewing is what goes out to the YouTube stream. And my job is to switch between gallery and speaker view and to try to spotlight people as they bring up interesting stuff like David did with the OWC dock.
Yeah, and as we move to the new version, of course, that's being run completely differently. But this is the way we've run it for the last year and a half. So it's to have people to figure out, and it's how it affects everyone other than the new live stream. Next question.
Our next question is from Alex L. in Novato, California. Does anyone know of an iPhone app that will let you take photos from multiple iPhones at one time?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I wish that was an option, but I don't think it's. I think it's a security issue, is the biggest thing that I have yet to see an app. But there is an interesting workaround, and that is if you want to have 3 or 4 Apple Watches on your wrist at the same time, because then you can pair each phone with each watch and hit the button at the same time at that point.
So I have to admit that what I'm trying to do is I have this little thing that I got. This is a Syrup Genie 2. It does a turntable. It's a little motorized. It hooks to a phone, and what I'm trying to do is take pictures for photogrammetry. And what I want to be able to do is, instead of having to move the phone and go around again, I have lots of iPhones laying around. And so what I want to do is just have an array of phones that then just, you just basically have the thing turning, and there's like 4 phones taking pictures of the object at the same time, which will make the whole system run 4 times faster, And so the issue that I have with it is, of course, I can have other cameras, like I can activate other cameras to do that in a relatively straightforward way. Like, for instance, I can do that with GoPros, but the problem is the lenses aren't as good and doesn't have LiDAR. So I want the LiDAR captured images, from the iPhone for photogrammetry, for object capture. But I need to be able to capture them all at one time. And I haven't been able to find an app to do that. Now, the funny thing is that I have two different paths of going down this, other than, and I wanted to make sure before I went down this path that there wasn't an obvious one that I was missing. That's why I asked the question. What I'm going to do is talk to John Idelson about whether the microbit does Bluetooth. Does it? Do you know if it does it? Is it a Bluetooth device? Could I pair a microbit to?
Yes, you can.
So the thought process for me would be to pair 4 microbits to each phone. So each phone has its own microbit, and then I just tell the microbits that I wanna take a picture, because they can just through Bluetooth give the take a picture command. So that's the thing I'm trying to figure out. Go ahead, John.
I'll reach out to Roger, but this is a good moment to say shortly you'll be able to order the lab kit of the microbit teleprompter project.
Yeah, so we're going to be doing that, I think. But as I learn how to do that, my plan right now is to have that attached, and have 4 of them sitting there talking to the phone. Now, the best way to do this would be to have the phones talk to each other. Given that there's other programs like Filmic Pro talking to other cameras, there's no reason why it can't be done inside the app. It's just no one's done it before. So I feel like a video put on YouTube will encourage people, unless Jason beats me to it. So Jason, if you build the app, I will promote it.
I've got a silly way to do this. You can do it with Siri. You can create a shortcut that says, take a picture, or hey Siri, say cheese, and that
I think that the only issue is that I have found that when you have multiple Apple devices and you say that, one of them takes priority and assumes that you're talking to it. You can't talk to all of them at the same time that I know.
As long as you're not logged into the same iCloud account on the same phone.
That would be very hard. I don't have 4 iCloud accounts. I don't find that to be practical. That's the only thing I would say. Go ahead, Bill.
I wish somebody would make the digital equivalent of a sync cable, which makes this super easy to do in standard photography, but there's just nothing I've ever run across that'll do that. And I think it's because even phones get confused if 4 masters are trying to tell it what to do at the same time. It's just too much confusion.
And again, volume down, we'll take a picture on a standard headset, and there's a Bluetooth command. You can get these little I bought a couple of them as a test, that you can push a button and they're using Bluetooth to tell the phone to do that. So one of my worst case scenarios is that I was going to take the button apart and then just do a closure across all of them, just build a closure where I just hit a button. What I really want to do though is I'm trying to sync it up so that it turns the turntable and takes the pictures, turns the turntable, takes the pictures. So the goal is to get these all getting along together. I believe that there's some development stuff for the syrup. The goal is that I just hit a button and then I walk away, and then I come back and I put another object in and I hit a button and I walk away. Not that I sit there and fiddle with it. This is if you wanted to capture an entire library of things, you would want it to be something that someone's not hitting a button every single time they want to take a picture. Go ahead, Lois.
The microbit would do that real well with the motor control. We've played with that driving a little robot, so that would be perfect. That would be fun.
Well, this one talks to the phone as it is. Now I have another one that's just motor control too, so we could do both. So the microbit may be a great solution, in general, until someone figures out that this is going to be important when it comes to object capture. This is all it's mostly a temporary thing for me because I know that it'll get replaced. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Oh, I was going to say that, and I'm not sure exactly how the LiDAR is going to work into that, but you could also do a cable out that goes to a computer where all the phones are, like for instance, Filmic that goes out to the computer where you would actually take this picture of the screen rather than take.
Yeah, I can't take that. You have to take a picture from the camera because it has to gather the data that it's gathering, LiDAR and everything else embedded into the information. So it has to be, that's the challenge, is that the only way to do this is to get the actual photo. Go ahead, Jason.
All right, here's a dumb one. The iOS earphones, whether they be plugged in via Lightning or just a normal one, the up or the down key will take a picture when you're
again, what we have to do is get past manual. Like we have to get past the idea that I'm going to sit there and do anything. Like it has to be something that I hit a button, like I hit it, I set something down, I hit something, I walk away, and I come back, and the object is, preferably because there's a command line system within object capture. My plan right now is that I hit a button and I get a model. Like that's what my goal is by the end of the year. I have that system built where I literally hit one button and the model comes out the other end. And there's no reason why that can't happen. Next question.
Tony Mobley in Newnan, Georgia. What is the OH panel stocking stuffers at $300, $200, and $100 for this holiday season?
Go ahead, David.
As a rabbi, I don't generally have stockings, but if someone wants to grab me a DJI Action 2 wireless mic and shove it in my dreidel, that would make me very happy.
Go ahead, Peter.
Well, given the adverse year all of us have had in pretty much the last 2 years, I'll be buying some greeting cards and doing some very personal thank yous to a lot of people locally, given that we can actually hug people on December the 3rd for the first time in 3.5 months here. And also some personal thank yous to everyone on the panel here that's helped me get through. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
You have to have some pretty darn big stockings, but I'd say a Creality 3D printer that you could get for under $200 would be a good way to get them started.
It'd be really stretched out. It'd be really stretched out. That's
we
good.
could print them a stocking.
That's good. Yeah. Next question.
Our next question is from Gilberto in Santa Cruz, Bolivia. How would you stream to and from multiple locations, 5 to 6, the way Zoom does, including the audio interaction? My first thought was actually to use Zoom, but is there a better way that doesn't break the bank?
Go ahead, Guy.
I don't think that there's a better way than Zoom if you can get the 720 or the 1080p account. We've been playing with Tony's show with Video Ninja, which is another contribution method. Vimeo has a way, there's StreamYard, there's all these different ways. If it's a venue type thing, like a bar, that's what I'm reading into this, is like it's a location where you want people on the other end to be able to interact with the people at the other end. A Zoom room would be really cool, because with a Zoom room, you can have multiple displays. So you could have something like the view of the room, like let's say it's a bar, you could see everybody, and then you can have whoever's talking, whoever's pinned or spotlighted on the far end, and then you could still have gallery view. So this is if you have 3 monitors, which if you're in a bar, TVs are so cheap these days that you can easily do this. But a Zoom room at $50 a month to connect multiple venues is incredible. And then you can just have a controller like this, and you'd be able to pin somebody. So you can just pick somebody and then pin them with the controller. So, and you could even do that remotely with the back end of the Zoom Room software.
We've been doing this for 10 years, first with Hangouts and now with Zoom. It works really well. I don't know if I would try to find a better solution right now. There are some stuff that I'm testing that could be better down the road and give us more control. But I would say that other than rolling your own WebRTC solution, I think that Zoom is a pretty great solution for this, and it's pre-built. If you want to bring people in remotely back into those rooms, it's just the key to the operation. Next question.
Our next question is from Brett Ramsey in Melbourne, Australia. The Australian Prime Minister has declared the working from home experience over, saying that the economy relies on workers getting back to work in cities. Do you see a pushback from governments and businesses against remote events and working from home?
Go ahead, Peter.
Well, I'm from Melbourne. I live in New Zealand. I've been over here 7.5 years. This is a very political question that you've asked, and I am trying to avoid being political in answering it. The issue is that the government has realised, both here in New Zealand and also in Australia, that the world has changed with regards to professionals like us not having to go into the office anymore. And that's one of the reasons why office hours actually exist, courtesy of Alex. And I struggle with answering this without being political, but what I will say is that the Prime Minister is doing his best to push people back to going into the cities to help with the economy. And that's the best way I can answer that for you, because my view on politics is not with that particular government that's in Australia right now. But I get what he's trying to do. I'm all for it, because all the cafes, all the restaurants need people to survive and to employ their staff. So that's where I'll leave that one.
Go to Rupert.
I won't get into the politics or how things can vary here in region to region, but flipping it around from the employees' perspective, I think this is just another reason where employees are going to start thinking twice. That they're being asked to, incentivized, demanded to come back into the office, and then not necessarily because it's anything to do with productivity, that may be a part of it, but now it's so that they can help support the local economy. I don't know whether they're always going to be happy to do that.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I'm having never been to Australia. I'll just comment that what I can see is that Australia, because of its giant landmass and most of its population is centered in just a few cities. And so that urban structure depends, all of the economy of the country depends on the people living in those few cities, those most populous cities. And if they can now work anywhere, they're not going to live in the urban cities, then their tax base is going to be decreased, and their income from people going into offices every day is going to be decreased. So that's why they're trying to promote it. But I don't know what the incentive would be to bring people back into the city as long if they can work elsewhere. Maybe it's just not nice to work in the outback.
Well, it's really nice. I've done it. Lois.
So it is so localized. It depends so much upon the structure of the region that you're living in. I'm not in a big city. I'm in a small town, a university town, an agricultural area. It's totally different than if I were in New York City. And at least here in the States, I think our governments are so diverse that I don't think there will be a uniform answer to that question.
I think we're about to see the limits of what you can do with PR. I think that there's a lot of CEOs and a lot of politicians who think that they can get up there and say something and some people are going to believe it. And the problem is it undermines their own credibility because nothing's going to happen. People don't want to do it, and they're not going to. They're not going to do it for the country. They're not going to wave a flag. They're not going to do any of those things because it makes way more sense for them to not have to do that anymore. And it is. The problem is all this technology got put into place. Zoom and other things Zoom went from a tiny little company relative to a massive company in 1 year. And all this technology around remote we all knew it was the future for the last 10 years, maybe the last 20. We all knew that eventually people are going to be working from home and in working from wherever they wanted to, anywhere in the world. It just happened a lot faster than everyone expected. And so this is just, there's a term for this about doing something into the wind that I won't say, but they're not going to be effective. Anyway, go ahead. Next question. Next question. Can you hear me? Oh, yeah, there we go.
I can. There we go.
Yep.
Dan Huber. Our next question is from Dan Huber in Erie, Pennsylvania. How many people have taken John Pretto's office hours technical assessment test?
Go ahead, Rupert.
Well, I was part of the graduating class of yesterday, I think.
John?
As I say, I'm trying to run my life pass, fail, but everyone, pass, fail, but everyone tries to grade me. But I did take the test, and it was a great deal of fun. So, John, if you're around, you could show them my certificate.
What is the assessment test, John? I don't even know anything about this.
I was going to send it to you today, Alex, because we were screwing around yesterday, and I came up with 4 different topics: audio, video, networking, and production. Jeff Francis is working on the audio section. It's 25 questions, and it gives you a good assessment of how knowledgeable are in each one of those areas. And then it gives you a certificate if you pass, like Rupert's showing right there.
Amazing. Well, I'll do anything for a certificate. All right. That's great. All right. Next question.
Our next question comes from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. With the DJI Mic, and he puts a link, coming out, does anyone think a Rode Go 2 refresh can't be far behind? Are these charging cases going to be the standard going forward for budget wireless mics?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
The charging case looks really nice, but there's going to be points where that case is going to be way too big. It'll be nice for carrying around, but it's going to be way too big to be carrying with me. And a cable would probably be a better solution to plug and charge it. With that said, I already have a DJI mic with my DJI Pocket 2, because it does come with the wireless mic, and they work really well. Of course, it's all 2.4 gigahertz wireless. So as long as you stay close to the camera, this is about 2,500 feet, but stay close to the camera, you should be good to go.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
I did watch a comprehensive review of somebody who had an advanced copy of them. They're not available yet until next year, I think. It looked like at the price point they're offering it, I think they're going to give RodeGo a run for their money. The charging case looks very nice, and they do include, you can charge them individually with a cable, and they send the cables for doing that. Plus, they send 2 lavaliers with it, which makes it very handy to have so that you don't have that little box hanging off your shirt, etc. So it seems to be very well designed. Although I thought the sound of the RodeGo sounds a little bit better than the DJI, but that may just be the quality of the microphone that they're building into the unit itself.
At that price point, it looks really good. It's good to be a creator. That's all I have to say right now, is that people keep on making tools that make our job easier. The competition in that area is pretty intense. If I were Rode, I'd be worried. Like they're going to have to move their price or improve their product. I have to admit, looking at the DJI, it just makes the Rode look old, and kind of, that's the hard part, is just the industrial design is better. And we should not underestimate the quality, the power of industrial design. Next question.
Our next question is from Gualberto, Santa Cruz, Bolivia. When streaming to Facebook, what is the best way to get access to a client's page? Currently, we use one Facebook user that is granted editor privileges, but lately we have been temporarily blocked from streaming, so there must be a better way.
Go, Jason.
My go-to way is with Restream. Restream makes this extremely easy. You can even have multiple Facebook accounts that are added from different clients that you intend to be using at different times. I think that's the way to go.
I think the problem is the access to actual Facebook is the problem. It's not Restream can stream to it, but it's actually getting the page to accept it. Jeffrey?
Yeah, I was going to talk about third parties like Restream, StreamYard, or Wowza, or anything like that.
I don't think that's the issue, though. I don't think that's what he's being.
Yeah.
We're kind of moving a little bit quicker here. So what I will say is that we generally find editor will work almost all the time, but we want to know who the owner is. In a worst case scenario, we will need admin access, to YouTube or Facebook, and you want to know who that person is, and you want to get to them quickly. If something goes wrong during a live stream, but we do test it often. But during a live stream, I need to know who the contact is that owns the account with that Facebook. I need to make sure that they are available 24/7 around whatever, the hours before my live stream on Facebook. It's a very unstable platform. just like Facebook is a dangerous place to stream to because they keep changing all the rules all the time. Next question.
Our next question is from Alex L. in Novato, California. Is anyone taking advantage of the maker pipe sale ending today?
Go ahead, Rupert.
I guess somebody is, because I think all their supply chains are tied up in Novato, California.
Well, I'm ordering a bunch of stuff. I was just curious. I'm basically decided to build I've gone from playing with it to I'm going to build half of my office with it. So I've definitely spent some money. I was just curious if people are going down that path. Go ahead, John.
I mean, it's like a starter drug. I started with a 3/4 inch. Now I just ordered the whole set of the 1 inch. It's a great fun to play with it. It's an adult erector set.
And why did you go from 3/4 to 1?
I have 3/4 everything I'm doing in the studio, but we're going to try to do some framing for things outside with the parks, and we get a lot of wind.
Got it. Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Alex, do you require an intervention on this? We'd be happy to jump in and help you
It's
out.
gonna be so much fun. It's just a rector set. The more I dug in, I think what really turned the corner was that they sent me the step files for all of the components. So now I can, as soon as I was able to model with it, I was able to, and I haven't built them into instances inside of SketchUp yet, but that's my next step. And then I'll just be able to snap them all into place. And the problem is as soon as you start thinking that way, then you start snapping them into place, and then suddenly you realize I got to buy hundreds of these things. And so anyway, that's what's happening.
It's the video equivalent of Lego.
Oh yeah, or just the maker equivalent of Lego. Next question.
Our next question is from Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia. Is anyone using an iPhone as a camera with teleprompter?
I go, Jason.
I have in the past. Prompter People makes an extremely small and compact teleprompter, and they actually do include, I think, with it, the ability to screw the iPhone on in the back.
Go ahead, Bill.
For real casual stuff, I use a thing called a Padcaster Parrot, and it's cheap. It has springs that hold a phone underneath it. It works fine. I use that with Teleprompt Plus.
But I think that he's looking for using it
it
as a camera for the teleprompter. Rupert?
I experimented with it actually with a Samsung phone, but in a smaller prompter, I found the challenge was because the camera, on the back of the phone is in an offset position. You've got to get the camera lined up in a kind of offset position in the prompter to get the camera lens itself centered. And then, if you're hiding it behind the sock and tying it in, then you've got to work around how to get back in there to fiddle with it when you need to adjust it.
To align cameras to screens, the macro heads, which are $30-$35, let you go back and forth and forward and back in very fine increments, and that can help a lot with that type of problem. Next question.
Our next question is from Danny Law in Malaysia. What controller can I use to mix the audio in an Atem Switcher software?
Go ahead, Jason.
Take the Korg Mini or Korg Micro or Korg Nano, put your Atem into MIDI mode, and you'll be good to go.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, there's, of course, if you have deep pockets, there's the Fairlight control console from Blackmagic. That's about $5,000.
There we go. Yeah, exactly.
But if you're cheaper, you have for 1/10 the price, you've got Behringer has the X touches, and I think they will all work in MIDI mode or maybe direct. Maybe it'll support the X touch protocol, and they make a variety of them from, a single channel to that are under $100 or $179 up to multi channels that are about $400 or $500. So.
Go ahead, Dave. Next question.
Our next question is from Gilberto in Santa Cruz, Bolivia. How would you provide a private site that contains a private video stream and also grants access only to selected users with individual passwords?
Go ahead, David.
As someone who never builds anything myself but uses other people's tools, I use Wix, and you can on Wix you can build a site. You can set a password per page, or you can create users who have their own unique passwords.
Go ahead, Peter.
Similar to what was just said, that, and also with the AWS, you can grant access to certain networks. So if you know your own personal or corporate network, then you can create cloud-based environments that only certain people can access. So.
And Vimeo also provides all those login controls. So login access is a part of the larger Vimeo plan. It's not a free plan, but it is a plan that you can use to control access to both VOD as well as live, as well as over the OTT. They really have cornered that market. Next question.
Our next question is from Doug Ferguson in Indianapolis. Doesn't it give you happy feelings when you fax out a production hours before a show and right before you go live, something breaks?
Good, John.
First of all, I never get happy feelings anytime I have to use a fax machine. I can't believe you that. And was it the TriCaster that died again?
No, it was a camera comms.
Yeah.
Horrible feeling when you can't talk to your camera operators.
Yeah,
horrible.
It's always just trying to figure out how you're going to handle it next. I once did an entire show over a phone for 9 hours over phones because we just had had everyone call in somewhere because we had the same problem. Yeah, next question.
Our next question is from Roscoe Jones in Brea, California. Are there benefits to having more onboard RAM for storage in an M1 versus a ministack such as OWC with additional RAM? If yes, then what apps might be most benefited?
And let's go relatively quickly here, Jason.
I think you're conflating storage and RAM. The OWC product does not have additional RAM. It just has additional storage. And of course, whether it's storage or memory, the closer to the CPU, the better, period.
Go ahead, Peter.
Very quickly, and correct Jason, the M1 Mac has has shared memory across CPU and GPU, and it's well documented, and I'll leave it there.
Yeah, and as far as storage goes, I would absolutely keep most of my storage off the computer. That way, if you ever have to fix it, you can send it away without having to have everything that you have stored on it. Next question.
Our next question is from Rupert McCrae in Dallas, Texas. A recent survey by the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers shows that nearly 50% of respondents do not use IoT devices like smart assistants and automation, either at work or at home or at work. Does this show that IoT is not used by professionals?
Go ahead, Roscoe.
I think a lot of electrical engineers see a lot of places where little fires can start, and they don't trust exactly the technology that's in all these devices yet. So the answer is professionals use it all the time, but I do think most people like to keep their life simple too.
And Bill?
My refrigerator and my washing machine are both upset that I won't let them go on office hours. So I don't want any more of this.
All right, last question for the first hour.
And this question is from Mitchell Hill in Wilmington, Delaware. On After Hours, panelist Jonas suggested a new app for controlling Sony cameras, Monitor Plus, and he includes a link. Is this possible? Is this possibly to replace for using external confidence monitors?
All right, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, it's amazing. We were on After Hours. We talked about it at length, but one of us picked it up and got it. I forgot. I guess it was Michael picked it up and tried it out. And the Pro version is $18. So for $18, you can have an external color correct monitor.
Can you say what it actually is? And when you say external color correct monitor, I have a heart. For $18,
It does everything. It controls the focus pole. You can put LUTs in there and have them push out to the camera.
And this is to interact specifically with Sony cameras.
Yeah, a whole line of Sony. Michael, you've been using it. What do you think?
Not me. You got the wrong person. I'm sorry.
Right.
So sorry. I apologize.
So, but this is primarily built for having control over the Sony cameras, though.
Yeah, the
specifically
A7R,
Sony.
A9, A7C.
Right.
Those.
That sounds great. If I don't have any cameras to test it on, so we'll have to keep our eye on it. It could be very valuable to make that possible. Okay. We are changing subjects again to remote collaboration. I think that this is something that is becoming more and more important for all of us, and we again have some fine experts up. And real quickly, Peter, don't raise your hand ever. It breaks our system. So anyway, so I'm gonna give that edit one more time. But to the panelists, never raise your hand during a show because it breaks the entire system to do that. Okay, we're going to change subjects now to remote production, and we have some fine experts here. Felipe Baez, as well as Stephen Moyer, are here, and these are as far as I'm concerned, these are my world experts in virtual production and remote production, remote collaboration. If I have a question about this, Felipe is the person that I go to and ask. So how do I do this, or how do I think about this? And I follow him on Twitter just to see what he's talking about. Like, what is he going to say, and how am I going to figure this out? This is and I know Stephen through Felipe, but so anytime Felipe said, "Would you like to talk about this at some point?" I was like, yes. Like I think I might have responded in like less than a couple minutes. So we're really excited to have you guys back on to talk about this. And do you want to jump into it and give us a little overview of what you're working on, Felipe?
Well, thank you first of all for having us again here talking second hour. Steve and I are very happy. Stephen, is it okay if Stephen starts our keynote presentation here?
Absolutely. That sounds great.
Okay, so he's gonna take care of that. And what's the idea here of what we're talking about? One, remote, right? Not everyone is going back to the office. Some people are in the office, some people are remote. Second thing is tools. We need them. And how do we choose the tools that will help us do our work? And then the third is you guys are gonna like this. We're gonna be talking about codecs and transcoding and speeds and M1 Max and Mac Pros and comparing them and choosing which codec to go for when you're doing your production. And you're gonna hear a few strong opinions that I have about some wrappers and using Final Cut and cloud storage and so on. So let me start with, of course, introducing Stephen here for those who don't know. Stephen, you can just speak up real quick.
Good morning, everyone. Also, my screen sharing is still disallowed, just FYI.
Yeah, we need to make him a co-host.
Yeah, we're really excited to be here. Felipe and I have done a number of these so far. We're getting kind of in a good groove with keynotes, talking about everything Final Cut. This keynote in particular definitely tries to elaborate on our learnings from the last couple of years, not so much about any specific project. And I think that's kind of what's special about it. But yeah, excited to get started. Let's see, I think I'm still disallowed.
Hang on, working on it.
Thank you so much.
So, Stephen, while we don't have your slideshow here, there is one question. Is it okay if I read that question, Alex, the one that we have there?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. There's this question here from Brody Hefner from New York City. A recent SMT Hollywood online meeting about production and post-production in a post-COVID world discussed this question. What forms of remote work are likely to continue? What do our panelists think? What do you think, Stephen?
100%.
Which forms?
I can't really divide these into different categories just yet, but I can say that without a doubt, a lot of the stuff that we've gotten into, which would be finding means for cloud shared storage, for finding ways to communicate quickly, both just through chat apps or within the app that you're using. Those things are always going to propel forward now that we know what we know, and it's just a train you can't stop at this point. I really don't think anything's going to go backwards. So it's really just about finding the happy medium between all of these things that we're learning so far, and we're still learning which things work and which don't. But I can say for certain, or with as much certainty as I can without being Nostradamus, that cloud storage in some shape or form, tuned to video streaming, tuned to video editing, I think will continue to grow very rapidly for our line of work.
All right, I don't disagree at all. And there's two things that I think will continue happening is people accessing from their stations storage and media that is elsewhere. And the other one is remoting into your computer. For example, I have the example right now of people that are both accessing my computers and editing right now here, because I am the one that has the high bandwidth and the amount of storage needed for a project. And I have people that are accessing media at their stations elsewhere as well. So we're going to go through that, and our slideshow is up there. So, Stephen, let's kick in.
Let's get started here. So, as we mentioned, this is all about working collaboratively and remotely. So to dive a little bit deeper into our backgrounds, for anyone who doesn't know, I am both an editor and assistant editor for feature films and television shows here in Los Angeles. A number of the things I've worked on have, been acquired by HBO Max or Apple TV Plus. I had a premiere for something, a feature film that I cut that went to Sundance and also got acquired by HBO Max. So I've been trying to hone in. And by the way, this is all in Final Cut. So I've been trying to hone in on what it means to be an assistant or to be an editor in this professional environment with Final Cut. What processes and tools should become a part of my toolkit and my system of habits going forward. And it's my absolute passion to try and propel a lot of that information forward. And Felipe?
Well, I guess some of you may know me here from office hours, editor, workflow architect, work in a lot of different things at the same time, do remote events as most of the panel here as well, and have worked in the same project as Steven for HBO Max. And we keep on working on other projects since then. And we have a very nice group of people that we are in touch every day and sharing workflows and ideas and trying to always keep working with the same people that we like to work with.
Okay, so let's get into this. I'm not the first person to say this. I think I may have seen this in a TED Talk at some point, but design is about reconciling where we are with where we're going. And I think that workflow design is actually no different. Workflow design is all about reconciling where our media is with where it's going. And so you always kind of have to keep your eye on the ball. So what does that mean in post-production in our line of work? That means you are always considering your source and looking forward to where your destination will be. In so much of what we do, source has more than one meaning, as does destination. But for source, this means, no surprise to any of you, asking about frame rate, asking about aspect ratio, acquisition codecs, color, resolution. I mean, there's just so many things to talk about when it comes to what it means to consider your source, especially in a remote workflow. And same goes for destination. Destination is not just about where this thing is going to be delivered. It might be, but it also is about, especially in our line of work, considering what app will inherit your work next, as we are often not the final stage in a show or in a production, meaning Final Cut is not the final stage. So what does it mean to work remote? Well, we have to consider our challenges, really, our core challenges. And I think we've kind of honed it down for ourselves as this group of ideas. So delivering original camera files, they're huge. How do you move that stuff, push it across the internet? What are some strategies for doing that? Transcode times. I mean, there's a lot of math and testing involved for that. Same with upload times. And upload times is a particularly interesting topic because it is tied to transcode. A lot of us are locked into a certain ISP with, maybe not so great speeds. And so that changes how we look at transcode times. Distribution of media. So this is kind of going back to what we had talked about earlier, meaning how are we getting footage? How are we getting assets to, from, and in between editors, assistants, and other people on our project? And we'll talk about centralized storage in the cloud and some other strategies. And then, of course, tracking both inside and out of the app. So let's move forward to original camera files. This is our shortest topic because we do feel that options are just limited inherently. And I think it's a scale. Most of what we talk about will be on a scale or a spectrum. And I think some of the easiest things to consider are to simply FedEx a drive. These are the old school ways of doing things, right? SneakerNet, or to upload proxies. But in our experience, beyond just the basic, taking something physical, shipping it, or holding on to it until you can ship it, holding on to it till you can physically deliver it, what we find to be a really good sort of middle ground is actually to use massive. And the reason we think that is because whether your internet is fast or slow, if you have the resources for a DIT or someone on location to find something, some means to upload beyond the slowest connection possible. Most of us have like a 20 megabit per second upload speed. If they can find something better than that, whether it be with a 5G hotspot or if by chance someone on the team has fiber that you can access, massive becomes really interesting because on the recipient end, you can create automated downloads through Massive's desktop app.
Can you explain a little bit about Massive or how it works?
Yeah, Massive is sort of like a cousin to Aspera. They have no relationship business-wise, but in terms of the mechanics of how the service works and its speed, I would say it's comparable to Aspera. Instead of being a subscription or something that you need to install hardware-wise, though, Massive is pay-as-you-go, and that is definitely a compelling reason to use the service. You can also create unlimited portals. In Massive's world, a portal is an entryway for any client, sort of a front-facing client UI where they can upload assets. And so instead of having to require that your client or that your collaborator download or subscribe to something, you can simply send them a link and they can upload to that. You're not charged until someone downloads, if I remember correctly. The other benefit.
And are you charged per download?
Yes, I think you're charged per gig per download, if I'm not mistaken. The other benefit is Cloud Connect, meaning I'm sure many of you have been caught in a situation where one person uploads something to one service, whether it be Frame.io or Google Drive. It has to be downloaded and then uploaded somewhere else to wherever your collaborators are working. Cloud Connect with Massive allows you to skip that process entirely. If I upload something, a terabyte's worth of media to Massive, and I need it to also live on Google Drive, there is a button that just makes those servers communicate with each other, and they copy it over from one to the other.
And one of the big values of that is like a good example is we mostly work in Frame, and the issue is that for us that I don't have a way to I don't have an easy way to set up download folders or upload folders for my clients. Like that's a key thing that Frame is missing, is I just want to send you a link to only upload. I don't want to make you a collaborator. I don't want to make you something else. I just want you to upload something. So Massive would connect to Frame in that case and just push it into the folder that I want it to go to.
Yes. And I think there's some other benefits too. I would love to use Frame.io's proxy features, but I don't think they're just as well tuned as I would like them to be for Final Cut. But if you're not working in Final Cut, you can actually have Massive send, like Alex said, Massive send your media to Frame.io, and that'll do some transcoding for you, right? You can download proxies later. So that's saving you quite a bit of time if you can think ahead, again, about source and destination and which pieces fit in between. So that's managing original camera files, just delivery, right? But we also want to talk about things at the Finder level.
You're going to say, Felipe?
Yeah. Yeah. I just wanted to add one thing. This is also a type of budget, of course, because Massive can become expensive. Download it just once, 4 terabytes is $1,000.
Right. Yeah. I was like, well, it's, like I could definitely see smaller files being something that would be valuable, but I was doing the math in my head of 25 cents a gigabyte, and I was like, that could add up really fast. Yeah.
It adds up really fast. But for example, the other cloud storage that we use here, we're going to get in just a moment, for people like you, Alex, that you have a lot of computers and you may have a lot of bandwidth as well. You can set up other ways that you could move things in between, and it will become a lot easier in terms of financial.
Yeah. That's great.
So building on all of this, what do you do then once you have your media in hand? One of the biggest areas of content that Felipe and I come across is files that don't have unique names, files that aren't organized. And so just as a basic lesson for people who are collaborating, thinking about those decisions and making thoughtful decisions at the Finder level are really important. So what does that mean? Especially if you're working with cameras that don't generate unique file names, say for example, an A7S, you're getting just C001, C001, 002, 003. We've ended up on projects where, there's 80 clips all named C001.mov. And if the folder structure for those clips isn't well thought out, and you end up in a situation where you need to relink, that could be an issue. You might think at first, well, because of the clip location combined with clip duration, there's enough unique information there to separate those things. Not always, because on especially DSLRs, there's often recording limits, and so you might end up with 50 clips all named C001 that are 59 minutes and 59 seconds. So you want to take that into consideration and proceed with caution. We like to rename files that are like this. Certainly don't rename files that are coming off of the camera unique, such as red files, black magic files, airy files. Most cinema cameras have the option to name things in a way that won't create a problem for you later. But if you do see something like this, consider changing it. And when you do consider changing it, obviously don't use illegal characters. Felipe can wax on and on about how these things move between file systems. Yeah,
I think one of the ideas of doing this presentation here in office hours is that we can get a little bit deeper on these type of problems, for example.
Yeah.
Why we're talking about special characters? We have Unicode. So ideally, they are all supported, right? But then we start talking about different file systems. We have APFS, we have NTFS, we have ext4, we have a number of different file systems, first of all, and then we have a number of different file transfer protocols. We have SMB, you have AFP, you have NFS, and then you have transferring stuff over HTTP. They're stored on a web server, and then they are being downloaded via your browser, a lot of things like that. And in between all of that, some characters, they change. Like a space becomes a %20, and so on. So the idea here is that and because our media is going to be passing through a lot of different file systems, a lot of different file transfer protocols, is to use a naming scheme that is as simple as possible, the simplest common denominator for all file systems that's never going to change from one place to another. So that would be letters, numbers, underscore, and dash. That's it. Anything else, you run the risk of having that file changing. And then once it changes, it becomes a headache. And you can say, oh, I've transferred things through a lot of different file systems and NAS and this and that, and never changed name. So I'm good. It only need to happen once in the middle of a project and things go offline, or you see a file modified alert on your NLE, that then you're not going to want to ever go through that again. So if you guys have like any comments about that, I would love to hear about it. But that's basically the way we recommend people to name their files. Skip spaces, do not use pipes, don't use hashtags and asterisk and anything like that.
And I think that, go ahead, Alex.
No, it's something that gets beaten out of you if you work in any large pipeline, is to get rid of all of that stuff, spaces and dashes and everything, periods and, all kinds of, mine, you'll see mine are just long codes, like if I'm really getting it, where I have, underscores underneath everything, but yeah, you spaces get beaten out of you pretty quickly.
Yeah. And you gotta love spaces when you look at a list of files, because they kind of created these fake columns and visually help you see a file. And I understand that, but it's just that when we're talking about remote collaboration and working with other people and transferring files from one NLE to another, from one system to another, you have to take in consideration that it's not going to work always the same. And someone down the line will be using a Windows PC. So then you're not only talking about macOS and Linux, you're talking about someone that doesn't have a volume name. It has a volume letter, and everything starts being different there as well.
Right.
Absolutely. And I think that just continues to lend itself to the idea of, keeping your eye on the ball between source and destination, and understanding that inherently there's going to be a bunch of unknowns in between. And so if there are going to be a bunch of unknowns, you can't make assumptions and start dropping special characters and other things. And it's all about trying to make your organization such that anyone can enter into that domain and find what they're looking for without a whole lot of trouble. And so actually on that topic, the next thing we had lined up was ISO dating. So a lot of people have the inclination to date things with the month first. However, in alphabetical order, if by some chance you lose metadata or someone's not paying attention to how they organize their folders, alphabetical would be the default, right? So in alphabetical order, things would be listed in order of month, not year. So that would be an issue. So we actually recommend ISO dating just for clarity. You don't need necessarily to have dashes, but there is an extra sort of relief when you can all be on the same page, year, month, day, you know, top to bottom, that it's going to be in order. And then of course, thoughtful folder structures, not just having, you know, folders upon folders upon folders upon folders. It does take work to figure out an optimal folder structure. These things used to seem silly to me when I was starting out, but they make a world of difference to not have to click around endlessly, but also to not, you know, end up in a folder where everything has just been dumped, right? So yeah, ideas to consider. So moving on to our next topic, transcoding and uploading.
There is actually a question from Roscoe Jones that is related to sorry, it's not from Roscoe, from TJ, about the unique file names. He says, speaking of unique file names, isn't the digital tech's responsibility to ensure the file naming convention is followed when ingesting files of the recording media? Yes, it is. It's the DIT's job. But for some productions, they are not going to have DITs. It happens on these multi-million-dollar projects they all have. But if you're talking about indie filmmaking or corporate filmmaking or anything like that, you're going to end up having an assistant editor. And sometimes you're not going to even have the assistant editor. You're going to have a predator, right? You're going to have a producer editor, someone that's dealing with that. And sometimes what they're trying to do is to crunch through the edit as fast as possible. They might ignore all of that. So going back to the question, the DIT is responsible, but is the first person that's touching that file from camera to the computer should be responsible for making sure that those files have unique file names, and that we're gonna get to a very interesting Sony slide very soon.
So yeah, transcoding and uploading with Felipe's foreshadowing. So working remote, you know, comes with a bunch of different considerations than working local. When you're working local, it's the three key considerations are visual acceptability, you know, whether something is too low res or is it high res enough for you to actually be able to do your job. Available storage and of course IO speed, those are really the key ingredients if you're working local. But as soon as you work remote, a bunch of new variables get introduced. And you know, the theme with all of them is sort of like you're on the clock, right? The clock is ticking when you're working remote. Because you're not working local, you have to consider how long it takes to get something from A to B. So that does mean considering transcode speed, internet speed, and hardware acceleration. So each of these fit into what we're going to talk about. And the most basic thing to consider is obviously your home internet speed. Most of us are trapped, I think, with 200 megabit down and 10 megabit up. If you're lucky, maybe 300 or 400 megabit down and 20 megabit up. If you're really lucky, then you have fiber, and I'm extremely jealous, or Starry or something like that. But these pipes constrain what we can push through them, which means we have to consider other options than just ProRes, than just a mezzanine codec. And we'll get to that in a little bit. So that's a little bit of a sneak peek. But yeah, Felipe ran a bunch of tests. So I think this would be a good time for him to hop in here.
Right. So when the M1 Max, the M1 Pro computers came out, the first question that came to my mind is, how will they help us assistant editors and editors do our work more efficiently, and how will it impact remote collaboration as well? So I took these three applications, Final Cut, Compressor, and DaVinci, and I ran them through their paces. Now, according to Apple, they are always saying how fast their new chips and computers are compared to the best computers, right? So if you go to Apple's website, M1 Max is, I don't know how many X times faster than the 2019 16-inch MacBook Pro. And that's not useful. That's not helpful at all. There is no way for me to know how that will impact my life as an editor here. Things that will help me is knowing how long something will take. I have 70 hours of footage. How can I deal with that footage? How fast can I transcode that so I can send to someone, and how long it's going to take for me to send that to someone? But first of all, there is something that it's important to talk about here, is Sony files and AV Foundation. Some of you might be really familiar with AV Foundation because you're developers, or you very closely work with things that AV Foundation does. One of the things that AV Foundation does is read media files.
Can you talk about what AV Foundation is for folks?
Yeah, AV Foundation is a framework from macOS that basically allows developers to pipe into this framework and read everything that AV Foundation supports, such as H.264, HEVC, ProRes, DNX HD, and a bunch of other codecs. AV Foundation is the guy that is the framework that is really doing all the hard work there.
I mean, what's really nice about it, as someone who deals with AV Foundation every day, is that it's basically a player that you can say, I want to play this, and I don't want to think about how I'm going to process all that. Let Apple do all the work for me, and manage that media, for me, rather than having to do it, have to enroll my own.
Now, that is the way that a lot of the applications read files, right? Final Cut uses AV Foundation to do that. Motion, Compressor, Edit Ready, Kino, they all do. What is the disadvantage is that when there is a bug with AV Foundation, all of these applications.
It's a bug everywhere, yeah.
Yeah, and
the hard
that's
part
gonna
is
be hard.
If you don't develop for it, and Apple only cares about that. So they're working on AV Foundation. If you're rolling your own, you're living in a very dangerous world. And
one of these bugs is that if you do not import Sony files from SLR cameras, so the A7 series, in a very specific way on Final Cut, you will not have the correct time code of those files.
It's a little bug,
If it's just a little bug. So let's say that you did an import in this very specific way, and you have the files there, and you built your timeline. If you send that timeline to DaVinci, which does not use AV Foundation for reading the time code on those files, your timeline will never connect, will never relink, because DaVinci will be reading the correct time codes. Final Cut never knew about them. They're starting in 0. And DaVinci's like, oh, you're telling me about a bunch of files that start in 0, and I don't have any of those. I have these files here that start with the correct time code. So that's a problem. So there are ways to fix that. One of them is to use DaVinci, import through DaVinci, and create your proxies on DaVinci. Then you're not going to have problems. So this is the way that we tend to do, because it's just a little bit easier. If you just bring your files, no matter how you copy them from the Sony files, from the Sony cameras, DaVinci will read the time code correctly. You create proxies there and send to Final Cut, then you're golden. You can transcode them to ProRes if you want, and then Final Cut will be using AV Foundation, reading the time code from ProRes, no problem. So that's the one thing that I want to.
Now, do you give up? Do you give when you import them in and you convert them to ProRes? You're still just moving the log format forward, right? You're shooting with log, and if anything, you're promoting it, right? If you go to ProRes HQ, it should be higher bandwidth and higher quality than the Sony capture on its own.
Right, but you're not gonna create any data that wasn't there, right? So
exactly.
One of the things that you're gonna gain is an OI and an intra-frame codec with ProRes.
Oh,
you might have shot on a long GOP with your Sony, and that's gonna be tons easier on your computer. And with these new computers, they all have ProRes decoders, so they can run a lot of streams at the same time. So that can be a huge advantage.
Well, also if you're scaling down, if you had something that was an 8-bit source and you're going to scale down eventually, having it at a 10-bit you'll get more out of it actually, because of the bicubic sampling or whatever sampling you use in the.
It's going to degrade less later on, right? Yeah. So I think the most important part of this here is Apple should be aware that there is a problem with AV Foundation and timecode and Sony files. Sony should be aware that there is that problem. They both have been, had their proper. We've reported to them. We've reported to them. Now, moving forward with that, I'm going to give you a table here so your eyes can be happy looking at a bunch of numbers. This is a table. This is just a starting table. Where these numbers are coming from is a huge number sheet with a lot of testing data that I'm collecting. And this is transcoding from a codec, an acquisition codec, to an editing codec. And these are all numbers from the fastest average in one of those three applications for transcoding those formats.
And what are you using as hardware?
A M1 Max. These are the numbers from an M1 Max.
So this is from like a 16-inch M1 Max with how much RAM?
An actual 14-inch, but it's an M1 Max with the 32-core GPU, 64 gigabytes of RAM, as much as you can get there. And this table helps us have an idea of the time that it's going to take for us to transcode. Let's say that we got something in ProRes RAW, and we want to send off to our editors. If they are all on M1 and M1 Pro and M1 X, and even a couple of the generations, 2018, you could get them to be editing on H.265 proxies, for example. But that's going to only transcode at 2.16x real time. So if I have 70 hours, it's going to take there about 30 hours to transcode all of that. Might not be very efficient. H.264, I'm going to have bigger file sizes.
Right.
I can maybe compromise on the resolution and have a little bit faster speeds. Now, the other thing that's not on this table, because it's way too much numbers to be sharing, the transcode time is also affected by the resolution that you're coming from and that you're going to. So, for example, if I get ProRes RAW 8K and I want to transcode all the way to H.264 480p, it's going to take some time. And for 4K H.264, it's going to take a different amount of time. And the funny thing is, H.264 4K is one of the most inefficient resolutions and codec combination that you have from any codec to any other codec.
I didn't even know that H.264 supported 8K. I mean, I guess it does.
Oh, no, 4K. I mean,
8K,
getting, let's say, ProRes RAW 8K to a 4K H.264 proxy, for example.
Right.
You might actually be creating 4K proxies when you're using 8K or red code.
But you can't go over 8K or 4K in H.264, can you? Or can?
No, you can do it in H.265.
Yeah, you have to go to H.265 once you go over 4K.
Yes, and there are some interesting numbers here that we see. For example, the ProRes part. That's where it gets really interesting. If you have something is starting in ProRes 422, and you have the bandwidth and the storage available to create ProRes proxies. Look at that number, 27.52x. It's going to save you a lot of time in terms of transcode, but then you're going to be spending storage, and I hope you have the bandwidth to transfer all of that.
So generally, your editors, when you're doing a distributed process, your editors are working probably in one of those ProRes proxy, H.264, H.265. That's what they're cutting in, remotely. And then you're tying those back together for the final delivery before it goes to color.
Yeah, and on our library, when we start, we have the originals. Of course, they are all linked there. Then we have one of these codecs as the proxy. They're editing proxy. They never have access to the original. And then when they finish, where that library has access to the originals, that's where we create the XML or finish from there. So
you have one
it's
place.
very easy,
you have one place that has all the originals. It has all the and that's somewhere local to wherever that's going to be. Is that something you try to make local to whoever's going to do color, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So that's where, that's the person that needs the stop where it needs to be the original plates is the colorist needs to have that
right.
There. But before that, when you're just making decisions about what to cut in, you don't need that. Now, do you have people working with those proxy files and then also adding the graphics on top of that, on top of the proxies, or do the graphics get added somewhere else?
Well, it depends. If it's VFX, for example, it definitely needs to come from the original. So an assistant editor, let's say that the assistant editor is not the one that has the originals, but they're going to have remote access to the computer that has the originals. So then they're going to create the ProRes 4x4 there to send to the VFX, that plate. And then when they bring it back, the assistant editor will create proxies, and it's in the central cloud storage in that case. So immediately as soon as the assistant editor adds there, everyone has access to it, commits back the library with those changes, and the editor open, voila, I have the new VFX shots, for example.
I'm going to interrupt you a little bit. We have some questions stacking up, and I just want to make sure we don't get to the bottom of the hour. Now, I'm not sure which ones I think you jumped in and answered some of them, so I'm not sure which ones we've addressed and which ones we haven't. I think I lost track of that while I was. I can
read.
You can read them, or Liberty can read them for you. Just let us know which ones are there.
Okay.
Did we answer?
Yeah, we answered the one from Brody Hefner, and we answered the one from TJ.
From TJ.
The last one in the queue, the very last one.
Yeah, I saw some of them disappearing here now.
I think that we're not used to having someone else, the guest read them, and so the whole system kind of falls apart. So anyway,
it's like I'm in house, right? So I'm like, oh, I have access here to the questions.
Right. Yeah. So we're gonna get rid of those ones there, and the TJ one is not. I don't see that one in my system. So we'll let's go ahead.
Now, for example,
throw some of these over here. Let's go. We're gonna try to bring order to the force again. So if let's run through these real quickly just to go through there. So go ahead, Liberty. You can go ahead and ask those questions.
All right. Our next question is from George Butters in Halifax, Canada. Do you see a role for professional digital librarians to create file frameworks plus related policies and procedures?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, what ends up happening, at least in our line of work, you'll have to excuse me because I don't know what line of work you're coming from, but that ends up falling, depending on the scale of the production, either on an assistant editor or a collaboration between a first assistant and maybe a post-production supervisor. There's a whole slew of people, if you have the staffing and the budget for it, that should be managing those rules and those assets. But on a lower budget production, that generally just falls on the assistant, right? There's probably just one. And if you don't have an assistant, it falls on the editor. So the rules are still going to be the same. They should be imposed. I mean, a lot of my work as an assistant ends up being about trying to impose order on chaos. That's a big part of my job.
We like to call that adult supervision.
Yeah. But yes, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Next question. I can't hear you, Liberty.
Sorry about that. Our next question is from Douglas Carmichael. What sort of remote collaboration tools could work for music production? I know Avid has their own cloud remote solutions, but would there be others that would work with DAWs?
Yes. Actually, the same tools that we're using here for our video collaboration can be used for audio.
Which we haven't talked about yet. It's coming up in a few slides. But yes.
We're going to try to speed up.
Yep. Next question.
Our next question is from Douglas Carmichael. Even when Viacom CBS employees are remote, an article talks about they're coming into the office for all team gatherings, as an example. Considering what we've achieved in OH, Belfast et al., do we really need such events to have a cohesive team?
It's not really something you guys do.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've survived productions without ever meeting in person. I've survived.
That is really true.
It's close to a dozen productions, big and small, over the last 2 years without seeing anybody in person. Is it necessary? No. Can it be helpful? Certainly.
Can it be tedious and annoying and a distraction and a waste of our time to travel in? Absolutely. Like it.
Yeah.
How many of us have stayed in the corner waiting for someone to recognize you and come and talk to you and be part of a conversation because you're shy to get into the circle, right?
Getting me into a car to go meet with someone is aggravating. Like I'm already angry when I arrive. You know, like I'm just like, this better be good. Like when I get in there, it's like, this better be a theater, or there better be surround, or there better be explosions or bright lights, and there better be really good food if I'm gonna come all the way in to see something. But to come in to have a conversation, literally the only thing going on in my head when I'm not speaking is, I could have done this at home. Like why did I have to do this? You know, and I'm just waiting to leave. So anyway, good. Next question.
Our next question is from Roscoe Jones in Brea, California. What types of projects lend themselves to overnight camera original distributions, moving of raw files via slow speed connections overnight?
I would say that if you're on a production where there's always going to be some math involved to try and at least put in a first guesstimate for what the shooting ratio might be, meaning how much media is going to be acquired per day. And then to compare that against available upload speeds. I was on a corporate production not too long ago where we were shooting, I think, a total of what was supposed to be 4 days worth of shooting, and it ended up expanding. Our scope of work expanded quite a bit, and we ended up shooting for more like 11 days. There has to be media rolling in constantly. So overnight uploads was critical for us. In that case, we were fortunate enough that a number of days we did have someone with fiber available. But there were plenty of situations where we actually just requested that the DIT transcode proxies for us to our spec first. And if they didn't have that fiber access, they would upload the proxies. So that's where a lot of like Felipe's math comes in, is like, okay, well, now we know they're going to have a constricted upload pipe, so we should go for H.264 for this particular shoot. And if they could do that in H.264, it's more like 30 gigs worth of proxies rather than 800 gigs of original media. So they'll ship the original media to us on a drive or on 2 drives to different locations, but they'll upload the proxies so that we can at least get started. And if you have a portal and automated downloads, you don't need to manage that upload. It just shows up in a folder for you overnight.
Next question, and then we'll go back to your presentation.
Our next question is from Douglas Carmichael. Viacom CBS is planning to return employees to the office in January. Do you think remote workflows like Belfast or Mobley will drive media organizations to reduce their office footprint?
If they're smart, yeah.
This is an old media versus new media thing. I mean, there's
a lot of money to be saved. I mean, to be fair, there is another side of this coin, which is that if I'm home, I am now using my utilities to do your work. And so there should be some sort of offset, whether that means a different rate or, something else to compensate for the difference. But it would be wise, I think, to shrink a footprint if you can. It just doesn't make sense to spend exorbitant costs on leasing a facility when you don't have to.
Well, and especially, I mean, when you think about salaried employees, specifically, you're essentially, as an employer, you're paying for their travel time. Like if they're hourly and they're only getting paid when they show up, that's one thing. But if you're talking about salaried, you're literally paying for their travel time. I don't think employers totally get their head around that. Is that there's a certain amount of time they're going to give you, and if you don't make them travel for an hour each way, they often will put that back into doing more, getting more done, as opposed to traveling. So anyway, let's jump back into what else do you have to show us before we run to the bottom of the hour.
So just continuing the idea of proxies and what you're editing with and the sizes. One example is the queue into the storm. though that project had 1,700 hours of footage. And if you were using ProRes proxy, we were going to have 11 terabytes of footage to share amongst everyone. And we knew that everyone would only have 8 terabytes of SSD on them. So we couldn't use ProRes proxy for that. So we used H.264, and that ended up being 2.7 terabytes, a lot easier on those 8 terabytes. Plus we needed to have original audio. There is no proxy for audio, right? So we need original audio. And we had the VFX coming in, we had archivals coming in. So all of that needed to fit within those 8 terabytes. So that's why we ended up using H.264. Stephen, I think you're gonna have to start your screen sharing again. And meanwhile, I will just keep on talking. Now, there are several different cloud storage providers that you can use as centralized storage. And they're going to start from very cheap, very easy to use, like iCloud. But iCloud, then you can't point the storage to an external drive. That's what drives me absolutely insane. I could use iCloud for so many things, but being on my 512 gigabyte laptop internal storage, cannot do that. You can use Dropbox. A lot of different other downsides, mainly with also how Dropbox decides to use their client on the computer and using extensions that are deprecated and so on and so forth. Google Drive, a little bit better, but you're running into limitations such as maximum amount of traffic data per day per user, 750 gigabytes for a lot of us, even if you have unlimited storage. So that might not be really viable. I move more than a terabyte a day, so that I can't use Google Drive for that. And then you get into the more professional and specialized parts, for example, Frame.io. Frame.io, great, really fast, accelerated, no need for use plugins, really expensive storage. And there is no easy way for you to really give just a link for a customer without making them a collaborator in order for them to upload things. And then you get a little bit better, and it starts getting more expensive with PulseLab, for example, but an easy solution for editors. Once you're already part of a team, with PulseLab, you have the application that will manage your libraries, and you're going to have PulseLab Drive that's going to have your centralized media. Now, PulseLab Drive is based on LucidLink, which is basically a client that reads object storage as file storage on your computer. So you're doing object-based access to your cloud storage through LucidLink and PulseLab Drive in this case. And then our favorite is LucidLink because it's the best of all worlds. The price for the storage, the performance, we can set users and accesses. So for example, we can have a very huge file space with LucidLink that has, let's say, 10 terabytes of data there. And I can say what each user can see from that storage. And there are a few other things that are kind of powerful there with LucidLink as well. I can say what name of the volume should have when LucidLink starts, what folder should be the root folder of LucidLink. So for example, if I have several different projects, I can have one specific user having a specific mount name and a root pointing to that specific folder. So that becomes his root for his cloud storage there. And the other thing is, LucidLink is one thing that I would recommend all of you to take a look at. It's incredible what you can do with LucidLink. And you do depend on your internet connection, of course, to access the files, but you can pin them. So if you put your cache into a fast SSD with a lot of space, you can pin the things that you're working with, and they're going to be working as if they would be local. And if a change happens to that file, or it gets replaced or anything like that, all it happens in the background that's going to be replaced for you on your cache. So those are the things that I wanted to talk about, cloud storage. And then Stephen, you continue from here.
So the model that we use when we're working with a team remotely is to depend on one of those centralized storage services. In our case, we often end up choosing LucidLink, and then to work with our team to make sure that everyone has or is provided some sort of local storage. So we generally opt for fast SSDs, The SSD acts either, depending on your workflow, either as a cache for that service. Felipe mentioned you can pin files in LucidLink so that they sort of behave like they're local. Or if you can't manage that workflow, if that doesn't work for you, if your internet speeds just aren't up for the job, these drives would act as a synced copy. When I say synced copy, what I mean is that instead of using a cloud storage service, if that isn't the right choice for you, you could be using something like ChronoSync, which, on a schedule that you determine, would be syncing sort of a source drive to destination drives. So meaning whatever it is that your assistant is managing as the home base for all that footage, making sure that all the edit drives are synced with that source drive. This is a way to get around slow internet speeds in a way. That way you're not streaming things, that way you're not asked to download things while you're in the flow of the edit. ChronoSync has a bunch of benefits here, obviously verified copies, scheduling, download only, and it helps for risk aversion, like I said, especially when you have slow internet. Moving on though, this is the general idea. It's very simple, right? You've got something in the cloud, proxies, and other assets.
Just one thing about ChronoSync. That's what I was talking about earlier, Alex. Instead of using, for example, Massive in case budget is a problem, you use ChronoSync in the background in one of your computers, and that ChronoSync is accessing LucidLink and PostLab Drive or Google Drive or Frame.io, and it's being used as a bridge to move things around. And
Right.
you can set those schedules on ChronoSync, and it works really well.
So it's just quietly moving stuff around, making sure that everything gets to where it needs to go, assuming that you don't need it tomorrow, and
Right.
in most post-production, we don't. I think that when we manage it well, when we're processing it well, we're not in last minute transfers except for right at the very end. So.
And this is all part of pre-production as well. It's on pre-production that, like, for example, Stephen mentioned, we should know how many shoot days we're going to have. We should know which codecs are being acquired. So we know how much data is being acquired. So in pre-production, we say, okay, dailies from day one, we're starting processing. The editor is getting them on day 3, for example.
Have you guys used Camera to Cloud at all?
Not yet. We'd like to, though.
We'd love to. But there's one thing that doesn't fit so well with at least Final Cut, is you can't use Camera to Cloud, the proxies that are created there, as proxies on Final Cut because they are not frame accurate. So what you would need to do would be to create multicams in which you have one angle as the original clip and the other angle as the proxy. So that would be the workaround right now to use that.
Yeah, I've reported it to them. I hope they come around to taking a look at that. But it would be a really compelling solution for us. Yeah,
it's one of the things that we've had success with if this is pre-Camera to Cloud, but this is us transferring stuff same day, is that we hadn't broken down the set yet, and the editors are cutting things together. So a lot of times when we've done some of our shoots, we have storyboards of the whole show, like not the whole segment that we're working on. We're just dropping in the clips, the circle takes into that, looking at them, and then going back and going, if I just had, like the editor looks at it and goes, if I just had this close up of the hand, I could cut around this other problem, and we're still there. So the speed at which we can see that in an edit, sometimes could change the way we shoot.
Yeah, speed is definitely a new and contentious variable with all of this going remote. And like I said, it's all still on a scale though, right? So even with this slide, the idea is you're going from one place to many, but it doesn't necessarily have to be real time. Real time would be the ideal, right? For all of us. If we have a big enough pipe, if we've got the services and the budget to make that happen. If you don't, something like ChronoSync, Resilio, there are other options. But yes, I know we're running out of time, so I'll move
Could you
forward
share
here.
your slides again? We can't see what you're looking at.
Oh, goodness. Yeah. Let me see.
They're always beautiful. Stephen makes them. I think I mentioned to Alex once that if he needed someone to make amazing keynotes, Stephen is the guy.
That's great.
Of course, I can't hide my Zoom floating. There we go. Hide. No. Hide.
We don't see the Zoom thing. We just see blank windows when you select Zoom. So They're just like a blank thing.
And by the way, we are using the multi-presenter option on
Can you guys see now?
Yes, the collaboration now, yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so moving forward. So collaboration in Final Cut is its own beast. So with all the services that we talked about, at the very least, if you are, everything's a spectrum, right? So at the very least, what you could do is simply zip up a Final Cut library and let it live on any of those services, Dropbox, Google Drive, all the way up to Lucid Link. The reason you zip it up, if anyone doesn't know, is because cloud services don't treat that Final Cut bundle very respectfully. You could end up with problems if you don't zip it up. But
and I zip everything up, like everything that's not a file. I just we'll zip that up because I don't trust anything.
But what you can do, that's actually what I just talked about. So you can drop it on any of these services. What you can do though is if you're trying to take it up a notch, is to use something like PostLab, which will manage your libraries for you. You don't have to zip it up. PostLab is as close as we have right now to something like bin locking in Avid, where if someone opens a library using PostLab, other collaborators cannot damage or accidentally also open that library. You can see live who has it open, that it is open, and you can open a non-destructive copy. So it acts as sort of a time machine of your libraries in general. As you finish and as you quit Final Cut, you have the option to upload another increment in your history of libraries, and it also has attribution, so you know who did what and when. But something really, really important to talk about when it comes to Final Cut and collaboration is to please don't use XMLs to trade sequences, especially. The reason being is that XMLs will create a cascading issue for you. What that issue looks like, some of you may have seen it before, is that you'll get duplicate media if you're not careful. And if you catch it, and you solve the problem, the next time you exchange an XML, more will come up, and then you have to solve that problem. And so if you're not paying attention, you will end up with clips duplicating themselves, and they may not even reveal themselves as duplicates until you do a match frame from a sequence back to the browser. So even if you don't understand that, the takeaway, don't use XMLs for Final Cut collaboration, for exchanging sequences in particular. Instead, what you should be doing is don't burn that up. What you should be doing is exchanging things between Final Cut libraries directly. If you drag one event, timeline, or asset between libraries, you'll get a prompt that looks like this. This prompt, while it is a little bit confusing, prevents that issue, prevents duplication, and ultimately helps to keep you nice and clean. In short, it basically helps to make it so that libraries are not exchanging things between each other that have identical asset IDs, or also to carry asset IDs from one library to the other. That's how it avoids the duplication. Worth learning how this prompt works. It's a little bit tricky. Felipe had to explain it to me a number of times before I kind of wrap my head around it. So moving on to library organization. What we do inside of Final Cut, particularly with VFX, which is the easiest place, I think, to start losing track of things, is we make compound clips per VFX shot. We also label them with chapter markers, and that is representative of a VFX ID. You'll use that to communicate with a VFX vendor so that you're on the same page about what shot it is you're talking about. And we'll keep titles with a role ascribed to them, a VFX role, above that compound clip. The title will be a description and scope for the shot so that we can either export a spreadsheet later with a list of descriptions for those shots and scopes for the shots, or even just look through them. When you're passing a library back and forth, someone can put their playhead over the thing, reveal this text layer, and see exactly what's supposed to be going on.
And you're talking about a true compound clip. You're building a true compound clip, as opposed to the source file, like when you actually bring it into Final Cut, is a compound clip. Like it is a, sure. It's a container From experience, I can tell you, don't edit that. So anyway, I've tried. I thought, I could put stuff into it. And it does not work.
And Apple has hid that option of open clip on in timeline, and that's good for a good reason.
Yeah, it doesn't work. It's a horrible idea.
The reason we use these Final Cut compound clips is because we can store things inside of them to create a history, basically, of that VFX shot. It's pretty common for a director to say, "Oh, can I see what that looked like 2 versions ago?" Well, this would be the way you do that.
Right.
We store each of those iterations inside. So as far as library structures go, we often opt for 1 per editor, but you could also do 1 per episode. Depends on what it is that you're working on, obviously. But then at the event level or at the bin level, we're doing something like 1 per scene, or if you're working on a documentary, 1 per interview. And then of course, keywords would be best used for what would otherwise be called subclips. We're talking about things that are thematic, similarities between clips as well. So if you have, several clips of a dog, you can tag them all as dog, and that's now a keyword that creates a bunch of subclips. You're not duplicating any media. You're just viewing filtered views of that media when you create a keyword. And then, of course, here's a screenshot of our timeline index, our roles arrangement from Q into the storm, so you can have a quick look at what our roles look like. If you're not familiar with Final Cut, roles are sort of the evolution of track labeling. In Final Cut, you just tell things you label them as what they are. So it's a very sort of relaxed, philosophical approach to things. So you just grab a bunch of stuff and tell Final Cut, this is music. You grab a bunch of stuff and tell Final Cut, that's a VO. You don't need to move things on tracks. It does it for you with lanes and with the magnetic timeline. This is what we have. And this is what a full episode of Q Into the Storm looked like. We were collaborating with upwards of 20 people. So it took quite a bit of work to make something like this. And a lot of people had their hands on this particular library. You can see all these orange chapter markers represent all the VFX shots. That's how we're staying organized there. And then, of course, you can see vertically, we're separating all of those roles into what Final Cut calls lanes. And it's all color coded, so we have some indication of what's going on. Keeping things in ideal states of organization will result in something that looks like this. This is a lot easier to navigate through, especially when you get to the end of an episode and are ready for turnovers. I'll let you guys pan through this thing here. But yeah, up top we've got blue for dialogue. Orange is archival. We've got scratch audio, VO, music, and sound effects. Finishing. If you do everything right, if you've got your master files, your source clips in the right place and they're accessible, and you've got proxies in the right place and they're correctly linked in Final Cut back to the original media, finishing is easy, relatively speaking, right? If you know what you're doing, this is a matter of manually flattening things, organizing things, and then sending an XML off to, let's say DaVinci would probably be the most common example. You can also create EDLs if you need to with a third-party app. But in a pinch, especially when we're working remote, we don't always have the means to organize things in pre-production. Maybe people hire you later on and you've not had a hand in where all this media is living. The next best option is a notched turnover. A notched turnover allows you to get around the idea of not having your media allocated in all the right places and all the right hands. If at least one person has that original media and can link back to it, a notched turnover allows you to skip over all that stuff. And what it is basically is you're creating a high-res output locally, and then you are also pairing it with an EDL that tells someone where the cut points are. And you're providing both that clip, that master clip, that high-res clip, and the EDL over to a colorist, for example, or a conform artist. So you're giving them all the constituent parts, but they're self-contained, right? You're not giving them handles unless you need to, if there's a particular need for that. You're not giving them original media. You're giving them a self-contained MOV, and an EDL. In Final Cut, the way this works is to essentially split picture and sound. It's just a visual. There's an actual command for that. And then all those compound clips that we talked about for VFX shots, you got to break that apart so that you're just living with the finalized VFX shot. And then you're manually flattening everything. So there's a command to flatten things automatically in Final Cut. However, if you're not careful, if, for example, there are clips stacked on top of each other with blending modes and whatnot, that may not be the best idea. And then once you have flattened, you are exporting a picture-only output in full resolution. So this, again, someone has to have that full res media in order for this to work. Once you have that high-res self-contained MOV, you drop it back in your timeline above the source timeline. And you can now see where the cuts are supposed to be. I have a little trick where I put that high-res output in its own container. In Final Cut, we call these storylines. And if you jump to the end of the storyline and highlight it, you can hit the up arrow and your playhead will jump to every cut. So I hit up and then I hit Command B to cut these things. We're kind of getting into the weeds here about how to do this. But once you've made all these slices, you can eradicate the original. You would obviously do this maybe in a duplicate sequence. And you drop your self-contained MOV with all of its cut points to the bottom, most layer, and put your VFX shots on top. And now, if you need, you can also pair this with a DRP. This XML that only has one clip in it, or one clip plus VFX shots, is very simple. I like to try and take the extra step of I think of it this way. I'm always in service of the next person in the chain. I think we all should be. And so I try and make a DRP for Resolve in order to get ahead of things. So sound turnover, we use tools like X2 Pro to do that, but you're keeping an eye out for keyframing errors, disabled clips, muted clips. You want to clean that stuff up. Here's X2 Pro if you haven't used it already. And of course, change list X is another really integral part of all of this. If there are changes, change list X will make a document that will help guide your conform artists out of the mess. And QC at every stage. One thing to note, I think Felipe can probably jump into this a little bit. When working remote, your conveniences are gone. And let's see, Felipe, you're still there, right?
Yeah, I am here.
Go for
it. Yeah, so there was a session here with Parsec just a couple of days ago. I haven't watched, and I'm dying to watch, but I remember how they capture frames directly from the GPU before it ever gets somewhere else. I don't know if they're doing the same on the Mac. You can use Parsec for this because it's going to be great because you're going to have high resolution, high frame rate, low latency to access those computers, like one of those options that we were saying about editing on someone else's computer, or Jump Desktop does very similar stuff than Parsec, but it's like totally Mac native, works really well. And the other ones, for example, TeamViewer, Splashtop, and even Zoom are okay, but you're not going to have high frame rate. You're not going to have high everything else at the same time, right? The same way as with Parsec and Jump Desktop. And I guess, and that's it. Communication, super key. Keeping everyone on the same page, having something like Discord channels, and that you're putting people in there, and make sure that they're always in communication. That's the way that we're going to get everything done. And basically that's it. Sorry about that. We went a little over there.
It's all good. We have a handful of questions. We'll just answer, let you just kind of do a blitzkrieg round. So we've got 3 questions just to throw at you. Go ahead, Liberty.
All right, we've got Douglas Carmichael asking, if you dealt with the shared storage security issues, what model would be best for remote via FX? Would it be the Rebel Mac model, process on the desktop, or the remote desktop model, process remotely, display locally?
The way I would approach this is going through the end, right? If we're talking about VFX, they need 4x4. They need super high resolution. They need the originals. So accessing a remote computer tends to be a little bit harder because that it's just going to be hard. It's totally possible. It's doable, totally possible. But the sneaker.net Mac there that gets the originals would probably be the way to go. And the other thing here in terms of security to keep in mind is when we were talking about Lucid Link is a zero knowledge model. They don't have access to your data. The client has you have the keys. You won't that password that you have, the root password that you have for your account. If you lose, you lose all access to that data. That's really important. And there's nothing that Lucid Link can do for you. So that's very important. As if you had your NAS in the cloud and it's your NAS.
Yeah, and I think one thing that we've found with visual effects is that there is two different kinds of visual effects too. With the compositing, you're absolutely right, and we found that we have to bring that local. It's just too hard to deal with. For 3D asset generation, we see more and more of our partners wanting you to work over Parsec into a cloud instance or into an instance that's sitting in a server room. And that's mostly data security and data and making sure that there's just one version of it and it's all part of the Borg. And so a lot of large visual effects firms have moved to, we want everyone to have, and this has been problematic for us because folks that are in Africa or in Asia or other places that have a higher latency just can't participate. And so it's really been, you have to have the low latency connections that are required to be a VFX artist with some of the very large visual effects firms have required that from a data security perspective. Let's go to the next question.
Our next question is from Roscoe Jones in Brea, California. When you have a Lucid Link file set for local use, are all others locked out of using/altering that file? How are you controlling file access to prevent conflicts?
So Lucid Link has options to lock files, such as Word files, Excel files, and so on. So once a person opens that file, it's locked for everyone else. But when we're talking about media, video, and etc., we are generally just reading that media. We're not making any changes to the media itself. So we can set people to have read-only access. That would avoid some other problems of people accidentally deleting things or moving things around. So it is possible for us to control access to the read-write folder and user or group level. Yeah.
Next and last question for the hour.
This comes from Roscoe Jones in Brea, California. What about XML for moving from Final Cut Pro to Resolve or elsewhere?
Yeah.
So we covered that a little bit.
That's what it is for. Yeah.
I would say that's exactly. So XML's for
I think that was asked before we actually dug through it.
Yeah. So, other outside parties, right? Other applications is what XML should be for, not inside Final Cut.
Yeah. Felipe and Steven, thank you so much for
having us
and setting us up. Just it's a geek fest. This is the stuff that getting information from actual operators on the ground that are dealing with this every day is so valuable. It's much harder because we talk to vendors and they have a way that they think they should do this. We talk to people who thought about a way to do this, but it's really great to have just real world experience of, oh, don't go down that path and here's the path you want to go down. And it just saves us a lot of time. So we just really appreciate your generosity and to come in.
I think I'm going to hop in on the after hours now. I'm going to hang out there for half an hour if anyone wants to talk a little bit more about this, because I want to talk more a little bit.
Awesome. Very good. All right. We'll see you all in after hours. Steven, again, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
For joining us. Thank you to our producers for the great questions, both in the first hour. If you're a producer, by the way, and your question gets sent back to you, it's in your notes. Like, it just meant that we ran out of time in the first hour. You can bring it up on another day. So just a reminder of that. But thank you for the producers for asking more questions than we could get to. And also thank you to the panelists for the great answers in the first hour. And tomorrow we'll be talking about plugins, audio plugins for whatever applications we want to use them for. And now we'll jump into